Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission today, well, it sounds simple, but it's actually pretty complex. We are diving deep into the evolution of the book cover. And this isn't just, a history lesson. It's really a critical look at how the cover became this fiercely debated piece of real estate in modern publishing.
Yeah.
We're going to chart its journey from ancient protection all the way to the hyper-specific, sometimes really controversial marketing thing it is today.
It really is a study in conflict, isn't it? Because we're all taught that rule. Don't judge a book by its cover.
Right. Everyone says it.
Everyone says it. We're told content is king, appearances don't matter. But, in publishing, that's just completely different. The cover isn't just a marketing tool.
Right.
It's the single most powerful, most immediate, and frankly, highest stakes marketing tool that book has, period.
Totally. It feels like that old saying has been, turned against the industry itself. I was in a bookstore the other day just looking for something new, and it hit me how much the whole visual vibe of the place has changed, almost overnight.
Especially in certain sections, right?
Oh, yeah. Specifically romance and contemporary fiction. It suddenly felt like, a museum gift shop crashed into a children's book fair or something. It's this really dramatic, super stylized, bright, illustrated look.
The cartoon look.
Exactly. What we're calling the cartoonification of book covers.
Yes.
And it's everywhere now.
And that shift, that aesthetic change, is happening because the stakes are just massive. A cover has 4 crucial jobs it needs to do in a really brutal, really crowded market. And it has to do them instantly.
4 jobs.
Okay, what are they?
Okay, first, obvious one. It has to grab your eye. From across a busy store or, scrolling through a million things online.
Gotta stand out. Second, it needs to tell you immediately the genre and the tone. Is this going to be a light, fun rom-com? Or is it, a dark, serious literary novel?
Big difference.
Huge. Third, it has to build brand recognition. That's super important for series or authors who are already a big brand themselves.
Right. You see a certain style, it's that author.
Exactly. And finally, maybe the toughest job, it has to make itself look different from every single other book sitting right next to it on that shelf or that webpage.
And if the cover fails at that visual storytelling,
yeah.
All the work that went into the actual book, the writing, the editing, it's almost pointless.
It's completely irrelevant from a sales perspective. Yeah. A bad cover or even just a mediocre one. It's just one more reason for a reader to, spend their limited time and money somewhere else on something else that screams, read me louder.
And you mentioned this pressure isn't the same for everyone.
No, absolutely not. We have to remember the resource gap here.
You mean for independently published authors?
Yeah, exactly. Traditional publishers, they have these specialized art departments. They have marketing teams. They have the budgets to hire really top-tier illustrators.
Right.
Indie authors, they're often juggling everything. They're focused on the writing, the editing. Maybe they have a day job. They just don't have the same access to the money, the market data, or the big teams that the traditional house.
So they might end up with, stock photos or maybe less experienced designers?
Often, yeah. Which puts them at a huge disadvantage right from the start,
Yeah.
They're competing against books backed by entire teams whose only job is to make that first visual impression absolutely perfect.
Okay, so let's dig into how these publishers, or really any successful designer, actually manage to grab our attention. Because it's not random, right? It's deep psychology.
Oh, absolutely. It's visual language.
If you just glance at your own bookshelf, you can probably tell the genre just by the colors and the fonts, even before you read the title.
Color is instant communication. Our brains are just wired to connect certain colors with emotions and, with specific genres. When a designer picks a color, they're basically picking an emotion they want.
Let's use some obvious contrast, romance, especially rom-com. You walk over there, and it's just an explosion of bright, often really saturated colors, right? Pinks, sunny yellows, light blues.
Right. And those colors, they instantly trigger feelings of happiness, excitement, fun, approachability. A bright pink cover is basically promising you a good time and emotional payoff.
Okay, but then you walk over to the thriller and mystery.
And boom, everything just darkens instantly. We're talking deep, cool tones, lots of blacks and whites, maybe deep navy blues, burgundy reds, dark greens. Those colors are designed specifically to create that tense, ominous, sometimes even kind of disturbing feeling that the genre needs.
They signal danger or seriousness.
Seriousness, complexity, yeah. And it's not just the color itself, but how intense.
You mean neon green versus a soft sage green?
Exact. Saturation matters just as much as the hue. A really bright, almost neon green or electric yellow, that might signal a very contemporary thriller, maybe something darkly funny or aggressively modern, feels cutting edge, maybe a bit jarring.
Whereas the softer colors,
A muted sage or like a taupe, that often signals something maybe more reflective, possibly literary or historical. The color tells you not just what the book is about, but kind of how you're supposed to feel when you're reading it. It sets the mood before you even open.
and then there's the font, typography. I honestly never really thought about how much difference a font could make until I started looking closely at covers.
Oh, fonts carry enormous weight. They're packed with subtle signals. You often see serif fonts, you know, the ones with the little feet or lines at the ends of the letters.
Like Times New Roman?
Yeah, like that. Those tend to convey a sense of tradition, maybe elegance or seriousness. Think classic literature, historical fiction, that kind of thing.
But then you have the other kind.
Right, the sans clean lines, no extra vits.
Yeah.
Like Arial or Helvetica. Publishers often use those to project modernity, simplicity, maybe a fresh take on an older genre. They feel cleaner, more direct.
And it's not just serif versus sans serif, is it?
Yeah.
It's how they arrange it, the composition.
Exactly. The weight of the font, like how bold is it? The kerning, that's the space between the letters, the leading, the space between the lines, all of that communicates tone.
So tight spacing might feel intense.
Yeah, or urgent. Wide, thin fonts can feel elegant or maybe airy, expansive. And then how they place everything on the cover, the composition that directs your eye and create like text that's centered and small feels quieter, maybe thoughtful.
Versus huge letters filling the whole cover.
Right. Massive, maybe asymmetrical type that dominates the space feels aggressive, demanding, it shouts.
There's one compositional trend, maybe more in the U.S. market, that feels like a bit of marketing sleight of hand. It's when the author's name is huge, like often bigger than the title and right at the top.
Oh, yeah. That's pure branding, like absolute branding genius, usually saved for the really big names, the blockbuster authors.
The ones where the name is the brand.
Exactly. It's for authors whose name alone guarantees the genre, the tone, the experience. Stephen King is the classic example, right? You see Stephen King in giant letters.
You know exactly what you're getting. Something disturbing.
Precisely. The name itself is the promise to the reader. It's the contract.
But what's funny, or maybe clever, is seeing authors who aren't quite at that level or their publishers using the same trick.
It's definitely a calculated move. It's an attempt by the publisher to make a mid-list author or even a debut seem bigger, more established than they actually are. Borrowed authority almost.
It's smart, though, especially in genres like thrillers where titles can be so similar.
Oh, absolutely. Think about how many thrillers are called like The Girl Who or The Woman in the, you know, it gets generic. So if you slap a known name like Michael Connell or Tana French right up top in huge letters, the reader doesn't have to guess. They see the name, they trust the quality, they grab it, it cuts through the noise.
That ability to cut through the noise, to create instant recognition, that's what makes a truly great cover stand out, isn't it? Like some designs become iconic.
Definitely. We can look back at a couple of historical examples that just nailed this and have stuck around ages.
Okay, where do we...
First, absolutely have to talk about the original 1925 cover for The Great Gap, the one by Francis Cugat.
Oh, the eyes. Yeah, everyone knows that one.
It's probably the most recognizable cover in American literature, and it's fascinating why it stuck.
Because it's not realistic at all. It's quite strange, actually. Abstract.
It is abstract, but the symbolism is just so layered and perfect. You've got those huge disembodied eyes, kind of celestial, floating over a city skyline, presumably New York, and they're weeping green tears.
Right, and there are little faces down below, too.
Yeah, barely visible, masked women's faces below. The whole thing just captures the novel's core themes instantly.
The green light, obviously. The feeling of being watched, judged, the hidden sadness under all the jazz age glamour.
Exactly. The eyes are often linked to the T.J. Eckelberg billboard in the book, that sense of moral judgment, maybe God watching. The green tears, the green light, they signal hope, but also unattainable desire, Gatsby's longing for Daisy.
And the masked faces hint at the hidden identity, the despair beneath the parties.
Precisely. And the craziest part, Fitzgerald apparently loved the painting so much before the book was finalized that he actually wrote elements of Cugat's imagery into the novel.
Seriously, so the cover influenced the text.
That's the story. The cover became like part of the literary fabric itself. It went way beyond just marketing.
Wow. Okay, that's an amazing historical example. What about something more modern that achieved that kind of branding success globally?
Well, can't not talk about Harry Potter.
Of course. A masterclass.
Absolutely a masterclass in global brand management through cover design, especially the U.S. editions illustrated by Mary Grandpré.
Those detailed kind of crosshatch drawings.
Yes, that specific style, the detailed illustrations, the sort of whimsical but really readable font, and the consistent, vibrant color schemes across all 7 books, it was instantly recognizable.
And it immediately screamed magic?
It alluded to the magical world perfectly, yeah. But critically, it built trust.
Trust. How so?
Because the aesthetic was so consistent. You knew if you picked up a book with that specific font, that specific art style, you were getting another piece of the same immersive world you loved.
And that visual trust paid off big time.
Oh, massively.
Yeah.
It translated directly into merchandising, the movie designs, theme parks. That cover aesthetic was the visual foundation for a whole empire. Didn't matter if you were reading it in English or Japanese. That look built a global brand that everyone, kids and adults, just flocked. For millions, that cover was the first handshake with Hogwarts. And because it was done so well, it worked incredibly.
Okay, so we know the cover is incredibly important. It's this vital piece of marketing art. But how does it actually get made inside a big traditional publishing house? It sounds like it could be complicated.
Oh, complicated is an understatement. It's incredibly multi-layered.
Yeah.
And yeah, it varies a bit from house to house, even imprint to imprint, but the basic structure is pretty and honestly, it's less like a smooth creative process and more like a competitive gauntlet.
A gauntlet. Okay, break that down. Where does it start?
It usually starts with the editorial team and the marketing team putting together initial briefs. These outline the book's core element, the tone, the target reader, and really importantly, the
comparative titles.
Yeah, the books they see it sitting next to on the shelf, the books they want it to compete with or be associated with.
Okay, so they write this brief, then what?
Then that brief goes over to the art department. They'll develop some initial concepts, often maybe 3 quite different visual directions to start the conversation.
And those concepts get shown around.
They go into these things called jacket meetings. And these meetings, they are the absolute bottleneck. Everything hinges on them.
Who's in these jacket meetings? And what are they actually looking for? Is it just about whether it looks nice?
Definitely not just about looking nice. Crucially, these meetings include the heads of several key departments. Editorial, sure, but also marketing, sales, and publicity.
So not just the art people?
Not at all. They're not asking, is it beautiful? They're asking, will it perform? Marketing brings the competitive analysis, what covers are actually selling well right genre. Sales brings data on where they hope to place it in bookstores, what the big buyers like Costco or Target are looking for.
Wow. So they're looking at shelf placement and wholesaler feedback.
Absolutely. These are the people with the sales data, the market trend knowledge. They know if a design will look good stacked 20 feet high at the front of a store or if it will just disappear on a crowded shelf.
So it's basically a committee debating art based on projected sales figures.
Pretty much, yeah. It's a balancing act. They're constantly weighing the visual risk against the potential commercial reward. Once a concept finally gets the green light from that,
which sounds like a miracle in itself.
It can be. Then it goes to an illustrator to create sketches, and eventually the final art gets done. And often that art gets shown pretty early on in ARC.
And ARC, the advanced reader copy. Let's talk about that stage. You said it's a moment of high risk. Why?
Because the ARC is usually the public's very first glimpse of the book, often like 6 to 9 months before it actually comes out. Publishers print a limited number, usually pretty
like paperback, no fancy finish.
Exactly. And they send these out to reviewers, bloggers, booksellers, influencers trying to build buzz early. But if that ARC cover gets a bad reaction...
social media storm.
Instantly. If early readers feel the cover misrepresents the book's tone, or if it looks cheap, or if it just doesn't land right, the feedback online can be brutal and fast.
And if the marketing team sees that negative buzz... they have to react.
They might have. And making a change after ARCs have gone out is really expensive and disruptive.
Because the ARCs are cheap, but the final print run isn't.
Exactly. Changing the final artwork for the hardcover, redoing all the marketing materials that might already be designed, maybe even delaying the printing schedule, that can cost a fortune and potentially lose them crucial selling windows like the holidays. Sometimes, if the backlash is bad enough, they might have to completely scrap the cover and start over even really late in the game. It happens.
Okay, listening to you describe that whole committee, art, marketing, sales, publicity, I couldn't help noticing someone pretty important seems to be missing from those jacket meetings.
Who are you thinking of?
The author. The person who actually, wrote the thing.
Bingo. The author, yeah. Now, in indie publishing, the author usually has total control, for better or worse. But in traditional publishing, their input on the cover is often limited. Sometimes it's advisory, sometimes they get a courtesy look, but in many cases, their actual control is minimal to non-existent, beyond maybe saying, I like.
But why? That seems crazy. It's their book. Why exclude them from how it looks?
Publishers are usually pretty upfront about this if you ask them. They argue that giving the author too much control can be a problem.
A problem how?
Because the author's personal vision, their emotional connection to the work, might conflict with what the marketing team, with all their sales data and market expertise, knows will actually sell the most copies.
Ah, the classic art versus commerce dilemma.
Exactly. The publisher's primary job, from their perspective, is to sell the book to the widest possible audience. That goal doesn't always line up with the author's personal aesthetic preferences, which might be, too niche, too subtle, maybe too literary for the mass market they're targeting.
So the author might dream of quiet, symbolic, maybe abstract cover that reflects the deep themes.
Right.
But the marketing team looks at the data and says, nope. A bright cartoon face is going to move 50,000 more units.
That's the potential conflict right there.
Huh.
And it's often a really painful compromise for the author. We saw a perfect example of this tension play out recently with Bonnie Garmes's book, Lessons in Chemistry.
Huge book. Loved it. But yeah, the cover.
The whole book is about Elizabeth Zott, this brilliant chemist who's constantly underestimated and belittled by the sexist world around her. She's fighting against being reduced.
And yet the U.S. cover is, well, it's a cartoon. Bright, busy, visually quite lightweight.
Right. And that cover definitely sparked some friction.
People felt it didn't match the book's substance.
Exactly. There was a comment on Goodreads that got a lot of attention, where a user basically said the cover belittled the book and the protagonist in the exact same way the characters in the book belittle Elizabeth Zott.
Wow, that's harsh.
It was a strong critique. They felt the cartoon style was aiming for a certain kind of chick lit aesthetic, a term I know you're not fond of, and that it kind of diminished the book's serious feminist.
So how did Bonnie Garmes respond to that? That's got to be tough to hear as an author.
She handled it with incredible grace, actually, and was surprisingly open about it. She implied to the comment and essentially said she agreed.
She agreed the cover wasn't quite right.
She conceded that, yeah, maybe the cover didn't fully capture the complexity or the serious undertones of the story. But then she pivoted and defended her publisher. She said, look, they have decades of experience, they know what audiences respond to, and they decided this cartoon approach was the best way to get the book noticed by the largest number of readers.
So a pragmatic acceptance. The simple visual sells, even if it's not a perfect fit thematically.
That seems to be the takeaway. It's that tension between respecting the literary depth and achieving the commercial goal.
It's a tough spot.
Yeah.
But is it always like that? Is the author always sidelined in adult fiction?
It's common, but not universal. We heard an interesting counterpoint from Monique Sterling. He's a freelance graphic designer, used to be a senior designer at Penguin. She pointed out that specifically in children's publishing, it's often quite different.
Oh.
How so? She said that in her experience, especially in children's books, if an author really dislikes a cover concept, their concerns are definitely not just brushed aside. In fact, she mentioned that many children's book contracts actually require author approval on the cover.
Really? Why the difference? Why more author power in kids' books?
Sterling suggested a few reasons. Maybe because in children's lit, the visual element is seen as so fundamentally tied to the story's voice, or perhaps because many children's authors are also illustrators themselves. Or maybe it's because character consistency across a series is so vital in kids' books. Whatever the reason, she said they regularly share sketches and concepts with the author, get feedback, and seek final approval before finalizing the art. It's much more collaborative.
So, a different balance. In adult fiction, the market often dictates. In children's, the creator's vision seems to hold more weight, at least sometimes.
That seems to be a fair generalization, yeah.
Okay. To really get why we argue so much about covers today, why this cartoon trend is such a big deal, we need to step back and look at how we got here. How did the book cover go from just being like basic protection to this marketing battleground?
Right. We need a quick history trip, and we have to start way back with the earliest forms of book. Think ancient Egyptian papyrus scroll.
Made from reeds.
Exactly. And by the 6th century BC, Egypt basically had a monopoly on papyrus. Their whole economy was boosted by controlling this reading material.
That sounds weirdly familiar, a monopoly controlling information access. But scrolls themselves, they don't sound very user-friendly for like casual reading.
They were super unwieldy. Imagine trying to read an 8-foot-long scroll on, I don't know, the ancient equivalent of the subway. Great for archives, terrible for quickly looking something up.
So what was the break?
The real game changer for the form of the book came later, between the 2nd and 4th centuries CE. This coincided with parchment becoming more common, and crucially, the Roman invention of the codex.
The codex. Okay, that sounds more like a book.
It looked like a book, The word codex actually comes from the Latin for a block of wood. Basically, they started taking sheets of papyrus or parchment, folding them, sewing them together along the fold, and then binding those sewn pages between rigid covers, often made of wood, just for protection. That was the cover's only job initially, keep the insides safe and clean.
But it solved the portability problem of the scroll.
Totally. And maybe even more importantly, it allowed readers to flip pages quickly, to jump to specific sections. You could actually index things, cross-reference. That wasn't really possible with the scroll. It fundamentally changed how people interact.
Okay, so we have the book shape. Now, how did we start making lots of printing tech? Where does that start? Wood blocks.
Wood block printing, yeah. That started in China way back around 700 CE. It was an improvement over copying everything by hand, but still incredibly labor-intensive.
How'd it work?
You had to carve an entire page of text backward onto a single block of wood.
Wow, one mistake.
And you start the whole block over again. Slow, inflexible. The massive leap forward came much later in 15th century Europe.
Johannes Gutenberg, the printing press.
Gutenberg and his movable type. That was the true revolution. His genius wasn't just the press itself, but the idea of casting individual letters in metal that could be arranged, rearranged, and reused.
Suddenly, making copies got way cheaper and faster.
Dramatically cheaper, scalable, faster. It was really the first industrialized process for mass communication and the cultural impact. You just can't overstate it.
Do we have numbers on that? How much did book production increase?
The estimates are staggering. Before Gutenberg, maybe 30,000 total books existed in all of Europe. That's handwritten manuscript, painstakingly copied.
Okay. And after?
By 1500 CE, just about 50 years after his press got going, estimates jumped to somewhere between 10 and 12 million.
Whoa! From 30,000 to 12 million.
It was an explosion of information.
Yeah.
The book was officially a mass-produced object, but even then the cover wasn't really about advertising.
Still mostly protection. Leather?
Still mostly protective, yeah. Often simple leather or vellum bindings, sometimes decorated but usually customized after someone bought the text block for the wealthy owner. The primary job was still protecting those valuable...
Okay, so when does the cover start trying to sell? When does it become ad?
That shift doesn't really happen in a big way until the 19th century. It was driven by a couple of key technological changes happening.
Like what?
First, mechanical bookbinding became common, making the process faster and cheaper. Second, the steam-powered printing press, using those big rotary metal cylinders, dramatically lowered production costs.
So books get cheaper, more people can read.
Exact. Literacy rates rise, creating a true mass market for books for the first time. And that's when the cover had to evolve. It had to start communicating, selling.
And materials had to change too, right?
Yeah.
Leather was too expensive for mass market.
Absolutely key. Leather bindings gave way to new materials, especially book cloth. This was basically a chemically treated cloth. It was cheap, surprisingly durable, and crucially, you could print on it easily.
Ah, printability. That's the game changer.
Totally. This allowed publishers to start putting decorative elements directly onto the binding itself. They could use new techniques like lithography for images, embossing for texture, gilt stamping for shiny gold lettering. The cover became a place for slowly for mass.
And what about the dust jacket, that paper thing we usually throw away now?
Well, originally the dust jacket was exactly that, just a plain paper wrap purely for protection during shipping and hand. Simple.
But then they started decorating that too.
Yeah, around the 1920s, dust jackets started sporting really sophisticated art design. This was heavily influenced by the visual style of 19th century artists, Trek, and also by movements like arts and crafts and Art Nouveau.
So that's really the birth of modern cover art. Art designed specifically to sell the book inside.
That's a pretty good marker for it, yeah. Commercial cover art, as we think of it, designed to catch the eye, convey a mood, and make a sale.
Okay, is there a specific example from that early period that really shows the cover being used not just to sell, but to be provocative, to challenge things?
Oh, definitely. For that, we absolutely have to look at Aubrey Beardsley's designs for The Yellow Book.
The Yellow Book. Okay, tell me about that.
It was a literary magazine published quarterly in London between 1894 and 1897. It was linked to the aesthetic movement, think art for art's sake, pushing back against uptight Victorian morals.
And Beardsley's covers caused a stir.
A massive stir. And intentionally so. He used this really bold avant-garde style, often stark black and white drawings, but with this prominent, shocking use of bright yellow.
Yellow? Why was yellow so shocking?
Well, partly it just stood out visually against the drab, muted colors of typical Victorian books and magazines, but yellow also carried a specific code.
A code for what? Scandal.
Exactly. At the time, French novels, which were seen as morally dubious or sexually explicit by the British establishment, were often sold wrapped in plain yellow bookshops.
Ah, so the color yellow itself signaled dangerous foreign content.
Pretty much. It was visual shorthand for, this might be risque. The term yellow journalism comes from around this time, too. Beardsley leaned right into that.
And this yellow idea was already floating around in literature then, linking it to bad things.
Yeah. Yes, the association was definitely in the air. Yellow was becoming linked with decadence, moral decay, partly thanks to Oscar Wilde's picture of Dorian Gray. Dorian is corrupted by reading a poisonous French bound in yellow.
Okay.
And then you had Charlotte Perkins Gilman's incredible short story, The Yellow Wallpaper from 1892, which uses that sickly yellow color to symbolize madness and the horror of female confinement. So Beardsley was tapping into this existing cultural anxiety around the color yellow.
And the drawings themselves were provocative too, not just the color.
Oh, yeah. They depicted figures associated with the new woman, women who were educated, independent, challenged in a role. One scholar, Dr. Simon Cook, pointed out how the designs deliberately poked at Victorian propriety.
Like what specifically?
Well, one cover showed a woman who looked very intellectual, surrounded by books in her library, not the typical domestic. Another cover, even more scandalous for the time, seemed to depict a high-class prostitute, a lady of pleasure, with her male client.
Whoa. Okay, so directly challenging sexual norms on the cover.
Absolutely. In a very public, visual way. The cover became this flashpoint for debates about morality, gender roles, and modern art. It showed just how powerful a cover could be.
That really sets the stage for the next huge change, the one that truly made the cover a mass marketing necessity, the paperback.
Right, the paperback revolution. Penguin Books launched their first paperbacks in the UK in 1935.
Making books suddenly affordable for almost everyone?
Exactly. It democratized reading on an unprecedented scale. And that explosion of affordable books meant the cover became even more crucial as the primary sales. Post-World War II, as the paperback market boomed and competition got fierce, covers became super stylized, very genreist. That's when you really start seeing the highly visual, sometimes lurid designs that define mass market paperbacks for decades. Without the paperback, we wouldn't have the kind of intense market-driven cover design.
Okay, so the cover is this complex blend of art, psychology, history, and business strategy. But then a book becomes a hit. It goes international, and suddenly the cover changes completely. Why, if I loved a book from the UK, why does the US version often look totally different? Sometimes even the title is different.
Yeah, that happens all the time. The main reason boils down to contracts and intellectual property.
Okay, how does that work?
When a publisher in, say, Germany buys the rights to publish a novel, they're typically buying the rights to the text, the words on the page. They get the right to translate it, print it, sell it in their territory.
But they don't automatically get the cover art.
Generally, no. The original cover art, the specific design and layout, usually belongs to the original publisher who commissioned it, or sometimes to the artist directly.
So the German publisher has a choice. Either pay a separate licensing fee to use the original UK cover art,
which can be expensive and might not even be offered.
Or, more commonly, they just design their own cover from scratch.
Exactly. And most international publishers choose to design their own, even if they could license the original.
Why? Why not just use the one that worked?
Because it allows them to tailor the cover specifically for their local market, their cultural tastes, their retail environment. What catches the eye of a reader browsing in a Waterstones in London might completely flop in a Barnes & Noble in Chicago or a bookstore in Tokyo. Tastes different.
Can we generalize about those different tastes? Like, specifically between the US and UK markets, since they share a language but often have very different covers for the same book?
Yeah, there are some long-observed tendencies, though they're generalization. Broadly speaking, UK covers often aim for a slightly more, maybe intellectual or subtle aesthetic.
How so?
They tend to use darker colors sometimes or more sophisticated typography. They often embrace negative space, empty areas on the cover. And they frequently use more abstract or ambiguous images. Crucially, they often deliberately avoid showing characters' face, leaving more to the...
Okay, so UK is maybe more subtle, more abstract. What about the US?
The US market generally is geared towards higher visibility, maybe broader commercial appeal, especially in huge chain stores. US covers tend to be brighter, maybe flashier. They often feature people more prominently, sometimes very specific scenes or visual elements from the plot right there on the cover.
Less ambiguity, more direct.
Often, yeah. You could say they sometimes play it a bit safer visually. Megan Wilson, a book designer based in New York, actually commented on this.
What did she say?
She suggested that because the UK market is smaller, publishers there can sometimes afford to take more risks, be a bit more niche or sophisticated, because they aren't necessarily trying to hit that absolute broadest mass audience.
Whereas the US market is enormous, so they aim for maximum reach.
Right, which can sometimes lead to designs that feel a bit less subtle, maybe less risky, prioritizing just getting noticed over, say, artistic nuance. Again, these are tendencies, not hard.
And it's not just the pictures that change, right? Titles get tweaked too.
Oh, yeah. Title changes are common. It's purely a business decision to make sure the title lands correctly in the target culture, that it means the right thing, or that it just sounds appealing locally. Sometimes it's minor, like Emily Henry's People We Meet on Vacation US becoming On Vacation A.
Pretty similar.
Yeah, but sometimes the change is really necessary for clarity or impact.
The classic example has to be Harry Potter again.
Absolutely. The first book, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone in the UK.
And Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone in the U.S. Why the change?
The story goes that the U.S. publisher, Scholastic, worried that American kids wouldn't know what a philosopher's stone, or they might think philosopher meant, Plato or Socrates.
Not an alchemist making an elixir of life.
Exact. They felt philosopher might sound too academic or just confusing in that context for their target audience. So they opted for sorcerer to make the magical element crystal clear right there in the title.
That makes sense from a marketing perspective. It's about removing potential confusion for the target reader.
Precisely. And we saw a similar thing with the author Evelyn Skye talking about her book, Damsel.
Oh, yeah. What happened there?
She pointed out that while the story itself might resonate globally, the word damsel carries a lot of thick cultural baggage. That resonance might be totally lost elsewhere.
So the title wouldn't mean much.
Or it might mean the wrong thing. So, for instance, the German edition added a subtitle, something like The Path of Fire, to signal the action. The Ukrainian version was retitled entirely to something like Maiden Against Adversity. They had to adapt the title, just like the cover, to connect with local readers.
So even if you get the perfect cover and the perfect title for each market, some books just aren't going to be global blockbusters everywhere, right? Cultural differences run deeper than that.
Absolutely. I mean, you have your huge global brands like Stephen King or Agatha Christie sell everywhere. But for many books, the themes, the tone, the cultural references, they just won't land the same way in every part of the world. A biting political satire about one country might just fall flat or even be offensive somewhere else.
So customizing the cover and title is essential damage control on maximizing potential.
It's an expensive but necessary part of the global public.
Yeah.
You're trying to give the book its best possible shot within each unique cultural context.
Okay, now we finally arrive at the heart of it all, this cartoonification trend, and why it has absolutely taken over one genre in particular, modern romance. But I feel like to understand why this specific look is so dominant now, we need to understand the baggage that romance carries. It's had a rough history, right? Stigma.
Oh, a very turbulent history, and yes, a long-standing cultural stigma. The genre's roots go way back 18th, 19th century. Think early novels like Samuel Richardson's Pamela or Jane Austen.
Classics now, but controversial then.
Especially in the 19th century, yes. This is when the genre really started picking up that negative baggage, primarily from men.
Why? What was the problem with women reading stories about love?
It was deeply ideological. You have to remember the rigid structure of 19th century society, especially for the middle and upper classes. There was this strict split. Men belonged in the public sphere, politics. Women belonged in the private, domestic.
And romance novels challenged that.
They were seen as dangerous precisely because they gave women, especially white middle-class women, a glimpse into a world where female characters had inner lives, thoughts, ambitions, desires, where they were sometimes treated as equals by men, where their feelings mattered.
That sounds threatening to the status quo.
It absolutely threatened the whole patriarchal setup. These novels were accused of planting dangerous ideas, suggesting women could be more than just wives and mothers confined to the home.
So the contempt was about maintaining social control.
Largely, yeah. And that historical contempt lingered for generations, leading to romance being dismissed as frivolous, trashy, not serious literature, even when modern romance novels often tackle really complex themes and feature strong, intelligent characters dealing with real-world issues. The stigma is old, and it's deeply tied to gender.
Okay, so how did this historically dismissed genre become the massive market force it is today? Marketing must have played a role. Harlequin
Enterprises was absolutely crucial. Starting around the 1970s, they basically cracked the code for distributing romance novels to the female audience.
How'd they do it?
Instead of relying only on traditional bookstores, which were often male-dominated spaces, Harlequin started selling their books direct, where women were already shopping places like drugstores, grocery stores, department stores, direct to the target audience.
Smart. And what did those early Harlequin covers look, still reflecting that stigma?
They were pretty conservative, yeah, reflecting the social norms of the time. You'd often see a couple maybe looking out at the reader, inviting them in, but rarely showing much physical effect. Very formal poses.
Almost chaste.
Very much so. But then things started to shift. The late 70s, early 80s, post-women's lib, the sexual revolution had happened, and the covers changed dramatically. Enter the clinch cover.
Ah, the bodice rippers. Yeah. Fabio.
Exact. The clinch cover became the absolute icon of the genre for provocative, often wildly over-the-top designs, usually a muscular, bare-chested hero passionately embracing a swooning heroine off historical dress.
And Fabio was the king of the clinch.
He was literally appeared on something like 466 romance covers. So these photorealistic, often heavily airbrushed, highly sexualized covers were the standard through the 80s, 90s, even in 10s.
But then, they vanished. Around 2020, it felt like someone flipped a switch and suddenly everything was illustrated cartoony. What happened?
It feels sudden, but it was probably a combination of factors building up. Digital publishing makes unique stock photos harder to find effective, but the huge catalyst was definitely the rise of the online book, particularly Book Talk.
Book Talk drove the cartoon cover.
It became visually synonymous with the kind of contemporary romance blowing up on the platform. The illustrated, often brightly colored, cartoon-like cover became the defining look of the modern genre. The shift has been so kind of unprecedented, one aesthetic to dominate.
Okay, so why did this specific look succeed so well? Why did the cartoon beat Fabio? What's the psychology?
I think we can boil it down to about 4 key reasons why this trend has worked so well and stuck so hard.
Okay, number 1.
First, and maybe the most important factor in overcoming that historical stigma, modesty and intimidation, or rather the lack.
Meaning cartoon covers are less embarrassing.
Exactly. They're inherently less intimidating and feel less overtly sexualized than a photo of a shirtless guy grabbing a woman. Readers report feeling much more comfortable reading a romance novel in public, on the bus, in a cafe when it has a straighted cover.
It feels more discreet. Less like you're broadcasting, I'm reading smut. Even if you're not.
Precise. It provides a kind of social camouflage, reducing the fear of judgment that still clings to the genre. It makes it feel more approachable.
Okay, modesty and approachability. What's number 2?
Second big advantage, diversity and bias bypass.
How do cartoons help with diversity?
Illustrated covers allow for much easier and, frankly, often better representation of diverse characters without relying on stock photography, which can be limited, stereotypical, or just poorly. You can draw any kind of person.
And bypass bias, what does that mean?
We saw this really powerfully with Helen Hong, the author of The Kiss Quotient. Her books often feature characters on the autism spectrum, and she herself is a Vietnamese.
What did she say about our covers?
For the mass market paperback edition, she specifically asked for an illustrated cover. Her reasoning was fascinating. She said she wanted to slip past unconscious bias.
Unconscious bias, meaning people might not pick up a book with an Asian person on the cover.
That's the implication, sadly. She wanted to tell a story featuring an Asian protagonist without making her race the absolute first thing a potential reader judges or focuses on visual. The illustration allowed the character's ethnicity to be present, but not necessarily the sole defining feature that might trigger someone's bias. It put her book on a more equal visual.
Wow. Using the art style itself as a tool against potential racism in the market? That's incredibly smart.
It's a really powerful use of the aesthetic. Okay, third reason for success.
Number 3.
Reader imagination. This connects back to what we said about UK cover preference. Abstract, cartoonish characters are often deliberately non-specific.
They don't look exactly like a real person.
Right. Which makes it much easier for the reader to picture the characters however they want. The vaguely drawn blonde woman on the cover, she can become anyone in the reader's head.
Including the reader themselves.
Yeah.
Facilitates self-insertion.
Exactly. It taps right into that core romance fantasy of the story could be about me or I could be her. The visual abstraction makes that imaginative leap much than looking at a photo-specific model.
Okay. Modesty, diversity bias bypass, reader imagination. What's the fourth fact? Has to be social media, right?
Absolutely. Number 4, aesthetic and social media. It's simple market reality in 2024. These covers are incredibly Instagram-friendly or book talk-friendly.
Why so? They just look good online.
They're clean, they're often brightly colored, the text is usually bold and clear, all things that make them pop, even as tiny thumbnails. They look great in photos, especially when stacked up or arranged nicely.
And social media is where the marketing happens now for romance.
It's a huge driver of sales, and the visual uniformity that the trend creates is also part of it. Think about authors like Emily Henry or Tessa Bailey.
Yeah, Emily Henry's books all have that similar illustrated style, same bold font. They look like a set.
Exactly. And Tessa Bailey's cover designer, Monica Rowe, even talked about this. She said, readers love having these bright uniform covers that they can display on their shelves like little art pieces, often facing outwards.
It becomes part of their own aesthetic.
Totally. It signals I read modern romance. I'm part of this community. I love this vibe. And notice how often, even within the cartoon style, the characters' faces are obscured, turned away, or simplified.
Yeah. Why is that?
Again, it makes that self-insertion even easier. If you don't see a detailed face, it's easier to imagine yourself in the story. It's a whole package designed for reader comfort, identification, and shareability online.
Okay, so this cartoon trend has clearly been massively successful for the romance genre. It helps fight stigma, it allows for better diversity, readers like the look. Sounds mostly good, but there's a downside, right?
Yeah.
Controversy brewing.
Oh, yeah. There's a definite, undeniable negative side effect that's causing some serious headaches and debates, right? And that's the way these covers are blurring the lines between books for adults and books for teenagers.
The YA versus adult confusion.
Exactly. Because the cartoon style itself feels inherently youthful, it makes covers for adult romance novels look visually very similar to covers for young adult YA fiction.
Even when the content inside is wildly different.
Wildly different. The problem gets especially tricky when you factor in the relatively new category of new adult fiction.
Right, new adult, or NA. That's aimed at college-age readers, roughly, 18 to 25.
Yeah, typically follows protagonists just entering adulthood, college, first jobs, etc. And crucially, NA fiction often contains very explicit sexual content, language, or themes that would absolutely never fly in traditional YA, which is generally aimed at ages 14 to 7.
But the covers look the same. Cute cartoons for both.
Increasingly, yeah. The cartoon aesthetic visually collapses the distinction between, say, a sweet YA contemporary romance, a YA fantasy novel, and a super explicit new adult book full of spite. To a casual glance, they can look interchangeable.
And that leads to problems. Like that story about the parent who bought Icebreaker for their kid.
That anecdote really highlights the real-world consequences perfectly. Icebreaker is a hugely popular new adult hockey romance known for being very...
But the cover is kind of cute and cartoony.
Exactly. So this parent wrote a review saying something like, my fifth grader put this on her reading list. I saw the cute font, the high rating online, didn't think anything of it. She took it to school, and then I got the awkward phone call from the teacher saying the book was full of sex and bad language. The visual cues were misleading, leading to a kid reading something totally inappropriate for their age.
Yikes. Okay, that's bad. So whose fault is that? Who's responsible for making sure a fifth grader doesn't accidentally buy an explicit book because the cover looks like YA?
Yeah.
Is it the parent, the publisher, the bookstore?
That is the million-dollar ethical question right now, and there's no easy answer. It's the core of the debate.
Some people would just say, well, parents need to check what their kids are reading.
And sure, in an ideal world, maybe. But we have to push back against that as the only answer. We need to acknowledge the reality that not every parent has the time, resources, or frankly the privilege to meticulously vet every single book or piece of media their kid picks up.
Especially with online wish lists and easy ordering.
And think about the economy. Many families have parents working multiple jobs just to get by. The idea that they can or should spend hours researching every book cover is often just unrealistic. It comes from a place of privilege to assume all parents do that.
Okay, so if we can't put it all on the parents, what about the publishers and booksellers? They know this confusion is happening. The discussion is everywhere online.
They absolutely know.
So what's their thinking? Are they just focused on selling books and ignoring the collateral damage? Or is it possible they're using the cartoon style deliberately to attract younger readers like Gen Alpha hanging out at Barnes & Noble after Sephora, even knowing the content isn't for them?
That's the more cynical take, isn't it? That it's indifference bordering on a calculated strategy. Are they looking at that younger demographic, seeing their aesthetic preferences, and using the cartoon look to hook them, fully aware the content is explicit?
It feels icky if that's the case.
If they're choosing not to find ways to visually differentiate adult content more clearly, it suggests they're either okay with kids potentially accessing adult material, or maybe they just figure the increased sales from the broader appeal outweigh the risks or the ethical concern. It's hard to know the internal motivations, but the outcome is the same.
Yeah.
Confusion.
So what's the solution? People talk about content warnings, right? Like, why not just put a mandatory 18+ sticker on explicit books like the music industry does?
That seems like the most obvious fix, doesn't it? The music industry has had the parental advisory explicit content label for decades and now you see it on Spotify, Apple Music.
Right. You could have a sticker on the book that peels off easily after you buy it. Simple.
It sounds simple, but the publishing industry has been incredibly resistant to the idea of mandatory, standardized content warnings like that.
Why? What's the problem?
It opens up a massive can of worms. It's a really slippery slope, apparently, with huge practical and philosophical issues.
Okay, like what practical?
Well, first, who decides what counts as mature content? And where do you draw the line? Is it just explicit sex? What about really graphic violence? Intense swearing, complex themes like suicide or addiction.
Yeah, defining it is tricky.
And if you apply a strict standard, you might end up needing to put an 18-plus sticker on a huge chunk of the bookstore, including serious literary fiction, intense thrillers, historical novels with battles. Would it become meaningless if, like, 3/4 of the store had a warning label?
That's a fair point. And wouldn't the label itself create more stigma?
That's the other huge concern, especially for the romance genre, which already fights stigma. A big 18-plus sticker could be incredibly damaging. It could lead to fewer sales simply because people feel embarrassed buying a book that's visually flagged as adult.
So it ends up punishing the genre all over again, potentially.
Exactly. It risks reinforcing the idea that romance is somehow shameful or dirty. So yeah, while stickers seem easy, the implementation is fraught with problems. There's no perfect solution that doesn't potentially harm publishers, authors, genres, or readers. It's a mess.
Okay, shifting gears to another ethical minefield affecting cover design, not just cartoon. AI, artificial intelligence generating cover art. You mentioned you feel strongly about this.
I do. It's concerning. The speed at which AI art tools have been adopted, especially by entities that absolutely have the budget to hire human artists, is alarming.
You can see the appeal for maybe a self-published author on a shoestring budget.
Okay, yes. For an indie author who genuinely cannot afford a professional human artist, I can understand why AI might seem like a necessary, accessible option. It levels the playing field somewhat. But when you see major publishing houses with million-dollar marketing budgets starting to use AI for covers, that's where the ethical questions get really loud for me.
What's the core ethical problem with a big publisher using AI art?
For me, it's twofold. First, it fundamentally devalues the work and skill of human artists and designers. But second, and more critically, the way these AI programs work is based on, well, it feels like borderline theft.
How so? How do they generate the image?
They're trained by scraping millions, probably billions, of existing images from the internet, including copyrighted artwork from countless artists who never give their permission for their work training data. The AI essentially learns styles and elements by analyzing all this ingestion.
So the AI-generated image is like a mashup of others' work.
It's often described as a kind of digital Frankenstein. It cannibalizes the uncompensated labor and unique styles of thousands of human creators to produce something.
So instead of paying a human illustrator, say, $5,000 for a unique cover design,
the publisher pays a small subscription fee for the AI tool and gets an image generated instantly that might mimic the style of 5 different human artists whose work was scraped without consent.
that doesn't seem...
It doesn't feel right to many art. Using existing art for inspiration is one thing. That's how human creativity works. But feeding copyrighted art into a machine, having it remix it, and then passing off the output as original work, that feels fundamentally different, ethically dubious. It threatens artists' livelihoods, and I worry it could become the default just because it's cheap and fast, eroding the value placed on actual human creative art.
Okay, let's end on a slightly lighter note, maybe. A trend that's less about controversy and more about appreciating the cover as an object. Special editions, they seem to be everywhere now.
Oh yeah, the special edition boom, books with sprayed edges, foil details, custom end papers, maybe a completely different cover design.
How's that trend being received? People seem to love them.
Generally, yes. Especially within the Book Talk and Bookstagram communities, these editions are hugely popular. Collectors often treat them like physical art objects. They display them beautifully. They bring genuine joy. It taps into the pleasure of owning something beautiful that represents...
But is there a downside? Does it feel a bit like consumerism taking over reading, turning books into just another collectible commodity?
That criticism definitely exists. Some people do see it as making reading more about acquiring pretty objects than engaging with the text, feeding into consumer culture, maybe making books feel disposable once the next shiny edition comes out.
Is that fair, though?
I mean, we live in a capitalist society. People like owning things that express their identity and passion. I think the real issue isn't the beautiful object itself, but maybe the motivation behind collecting.
What do you mean?
Is someone collecting these special editions because they genuinely love the book and the artistry and it brings them joy to own it? Or are they collecting them primarily to, like, show off online, signal wealth, or create a kind of curated, perhaps elitist image?
So the problem isn't the pretty book. It's using it for status gain.
I think that's where it gets potentially problematic, yeah. If owning the book brings you joy and enhances your connection to the story, great. If it's just about flexing, maybe less so. But mostly it seems to bring people happy.
Okay. Looking ahead, trends in cover design obviously shift. Market fatigue sets in. Beyond the big AI question, are there any specific visual trends you think we'll see less of soon? Because people are just tired of them. And what are people asking for more of?
Yeah, you definitely hear rumblings among readers and designers. I suspect we might see fewer covers that are just flowers or generic names.
The sad, beige, literary fiction look.
Kind of, yeah. Or just floral wallpaper. They can feel a bit boring, maybe don't stand out enough. Also, I think designers are getting tired of covers where the character is staring straight out at the reader.
Why? Too intense.
It can feel a bit confrontational or maybe just creepy depending on the execution. And definitely those very stark, monochrome, ominous-looking thriller covers, usually with a figure walking away down a road or something.
Seen a million of those.
Exactly. They've dominated for so long, they're starting to feel really predictable, maybe a bit stale.
So if those are on the way out, what's the vibe people want? What's the next cool thing?
There seems to be a real hunger for more weird, abstract covers. Things that are genuinely surprising, maybe a bit funny, visually complex covers that make you stop and go, huh, what is that?
Intrigue over obviousness.
Yeah. Also, a desire for more authentic feeling retro moments, designs that genuinely channel, say, 70s paperback art, or maybe cool 90s graphics, but in a fresh way, and generally. Just covers that are undeniably beautiful and artistic, almost demanding you admire them. The weirder, the more unique, the better, as long as they still somehow signal the book's tone. People seem ready for something new after years of certain dominant trends. Market fatigue always pushes creativity forward eventually. So if we try and wrap this all up, we've seen the book cover evolve from just being a protective wrapper for scrolls into this incredibly complex, highly optimized psychological marketing tool. And today, it feels like it's right at this really challenging intersection. It's caught up in navigating old cultural taboos like the romance stigma. It's facing down new ethical dilemmas, especially around AI art. And it's constantly insisting to huge shifts in media and culture, like the aesthetics driven by Instagram and TikTok. The cover is really where literature, commerce, technology, and visual art all collide.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating how that cartoon trend, despite the controversy around blurring lines with YA content, has actually been so effective in some ways. Like breaking down some of that romance stigma, bypassing unconscious bias, making a whole genre feel more modern and approachable visually.
It's had a huge impact, for better or worse.
So given that covers are always changing, even classics like Gatsby get redesigned constantly to appeal to whatever the current market wants. Here's the final thought I want to leave you, the listener, with. What comes next? If cartoonification was powerful enough to completely redefine the look of a major genre, what's the next big visual trend that could be disruptive enough to do that again, maybe somewhere else? Will it be something tech-driven, like augmented reality covers? Will it be about texture and materials? What visual language is out there that's powerful enough to shake things up in a way we haven't even imagined yet?
That is the multi-million-dollar question for publishers everywhere, isn't it?
It really is. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.